Premier Stephen Miles claims he has been misrepresented in the reporting of his laughing response to a question about the state's youth crime crisis. Mr Miles was heavily criticised for his conduct at a Brisbane Media Club luncheon where Sky News attempted to question him over demands for greater police visibility.
The daughter of murdered Brisbane grandmother Vilene White has called for police to patrol every Queensland shopping centre after the 70-year-old was stabbed to death in front of her 6-year-old granddaughter at Ipswich. When Sky News tried to ask Premier Stephen Miles over why his Media Club speech overlooked the youth crime issue, he sought to shut down the questioning.
Premier Adam Walters from Sky News, the people of Ipswich and North Lakes in Brisbane's north would have noted that there wasn't a single reference to youth crime in your speech. Given
it was a speech about housing.
It was, but given that the events of the weekend were so fresh, perhaps there might have been an expectation.
I figured I'd get a question.
Then a response that stunned many in the audience.
The absence of any reference to youth crime in your speech to the Queensland Media Club would have been noted by more than a few, including the people of those communities. Premier, I'm sure you concede the last 2 summers have been bookended by the murders of young mother Emma Lovell and just 3 days ago, grandmother Vilene White.
After a wave of online criticism, the Premier has since posted that his response had been misrepresented. No one in Queensland, he said, myself included, is laughing at this tragedy. And for any news outlet to suggest so is disrespectful. A family and a community is grieving. Sensational headlines and misrepresentations have no part to play in Queensland this week. The opposition leader disagreed.
It's not a laughing matter, and people are at breaking point, and families who are the victim of youth crime are at breaking point.
The Liberal National Party says the government's own figures reveal the Queensland Police Service has been depleted by more than 300 officers in 18 months. Adam Walters, Sky News.
Joining me live is Associate Professor of Criminal Justice and Criminology, Dr Terry Goldsworthy. Thank you so much for joining us. And this story is certainly before the courts, as you well know, so we can't go into specifics, but certainly our thoughts are with those people who are affected. We're going to talk to Adam Walters on this shortly, but what do you think in terms of that press conference? Do you think Stephen Miles was misrepresented?
Look, I think the press conference speaks for itself. I mean, the video is quite clear. He's asked a question about a horrific offence, and his response is to giggle and laugh. Like, it's astounding. I've never seen anything like it. I hope I don't see anything like it again. And clearly he should be coming out and apologising. To come out with some kind of fake outrage that people shouldn't be criticising him is just... I can't understand it. I mean, the video speaks for itself. He giggled and laughed when he was asked about that serious offence that occurred on the weekend.
The opposition, David Crisafulli, said that Queensland is at breaking point. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, certainly. The data that I've looked at shows that crime overall has increased yet again in the last financial period quite substantially. We're seeing things like stolen vehicles go up, break-and-enters go up, robberies go up, assaults have gone up. So, yet this follows on a previous year of increases. So we've now had a couple of years of increasing crime. I think it's problematic. You know, we've seen the new government come in and reappoint 2 ministers, the police minister and the youth crime minister. So they haven't performed well in their portfolios, yet they're reappointed. There's now some calls for the commissioner to step down. They're becoming increasingly loud. So I think for the Premier to get any area in the space of crime, and particularly youth crime here, he can't move the ministers, he just reappointed them. I think you may see a change at the top in the Queensland Police Service.
Who would you say is in charge then at the moment?
Well, look, I think the youth criminals are in charge in Queensland. I mean, they seem to commit offences with impunity, get bail and go back out and commit more serious offences. And this isn't something new. We knew that youth offenders on bail had a high rates of reoffending, and the government seems incapable of fixing it, and they blame the judiciary when it doesn't work. Well, the problem with that is that the government at any stage can take legislation to Parliament and legislate that youth offenders, serious repeat offenders who are on serious matters don't get bail. There's no show cause, they just don't get bail. They can also open up the courts, which is another criticism this week, of a lack of transparency in regards to how these people are actually getting bail and how those decisions are made. And again, the Premier blamed the judges. Well, if you're not happy with what the judges are doing and are not meeting community expectations, then go to Parliament with legislation. I'm sure the LNP will support it, and legislate that the media can go into these child matters and report how the decisions are made.
We're reporting today anti-youth crime legislation is going to be put forward in Victoria, which would prevent minors from purchasing machetes in Melbourne. What do you think of this potential legislation?
Yeah, look, I think anything that prevents young people having knives or machetes or bladed weapons is a useful step forward. I mean, in Queensland, for instance, the offences with young people involving bladed weapons has increased 22% since 2019. They're the weapon of choice in terms of young people. They can't get access to guns, etc. But knives are just as deadly, and they're the most common weapon used in homicides in Australia. So, you know, anything that can reduce the access to those type of weapons, which there's no call for in terms of having them in public. There's absolutely no legitimate reason you would need a machete or a large hunting knife in public. I think that's a good move and probably well overdue.
You and I have spoken before, Dr Terry Goldsworthy, on parenting and how potentially many parents need to really step up in their parenting towards their children. What more do we need to know in that aspect?
Well, yeah, there's three aspects to crime. We've got the pre-crime, which is what you're talking about, the parenting issues where we see children fall through the gaps or start to go into criminal behaviour. And I think we can do a lot more in that space to prevent, because prevention is obviously better than cure. So when kids are not engaged with education, when they're missing school, they're not turning up to school, we need to ensure that we're capturing that. When they can't get useful employment, now how do we skill them up? When there's drugs and DV in the house, we need to make sure there's support in place for the children in that house, and also that we give the parents some kind of support to become good parents. If we can increase those kind of measures, and they're not cheap and they take a long time to come into play, you're going to stop people going on to become serious repeat offenders. So then you can worry about the crime aspect, which is where you're protecting the community. And the third aspect is rehabilitation of the offenders down the track. So I think, you know, there's a lot of focus on the middle where they're offending, and I think that's been a problem area for us in terms of keeping communities safe. But as well as ensuring that, we've got to make sure the other two ends of the pipeline are being addressed. Otherwise, we're just going to fight a losing war to stop these hardcore offenders going out and creating mayhem.
Dr Terry Goldsworthy, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks, Jane.
Joining me live now is Brisbane Bureau Chief Adam Walters. Adam, good morning to you. So the fallout from